My neighbor's teenagers kept blasting music late at night, and when I complained, their dad snapped. They're just expressing themselves, get over it. When I set up a noise complaint with the city, he laughed. Good luck, nothing will happen. His face went pale when a judge ordered him to pay a massive fine and confiscated their speakers. I live in a quiet neighborhood just outside Austin, Texas. You know the type: suburban, tree-lined streets, retirees who wave at you when you drive by, and families with kids who play outside after school. It's the kind of place where things don't really happen, and that's exactly why I chose to live here. For years, everything was peaceful. I'd sit on my back porch in the evenings, listen to crickets, and enjoy the fact that I didn't have to deal with traffic noise, loud bars, or sirens blaring at all hours. Then they moved in. At first, I didn't think much about the new neighbors. Just another family with teenagers, no big deal. I waved when I saw them outside. They didn't wave back, but whatever. Not everyone's friendly. Then, the music started. The first time it happened, it was a Friday night. The bass was so deep I could feel it in my chest while I was lying in bed. I looked at the clock, 1:15 a.m. Annoying? Yes. But I figured maybe they were having a party. New people, housewarming, sure. It happens. But then it happened again on Saturday. And then Sunday. By the next weekend, it wasn't just the weekends anymore. It was every night. I don't mean the occasional loud TV or music playing at a reasonable volume. No, I mean full-on, window rattling, floor shaking, house vibrating bass at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., sometimes later. The kind of music that makes you question if your furniture is going to fall apart. At first, I tried to ignore it. I turned on a fan. I tried earplugs. Nothing helped. My walls would literally hum with the bass. I work early. I need my sleep. This was not going to work. So I did the reasonable thing. One evening, I walked next door and knocked. Rick, the dad, answered. He was holding a beer, looking half bored and half annoyed before I even said anything. Hey, I live next door. Your kids' music has been pretty loud late at night. I was hoping you could ask them to turn it down a little. He took a sip of his beer and smirked. They're just expressing themselves, man. They're kids. Get over it. Then he closed the door. Okay. Cool. So much for being neighborly. If you think the music stopped, you'd be wrong. In fact, it got louder. It almost felt intentional now. Not only was the bass shaking my windows, but I could hear them laughing whenever I knocked on the wall to get their attention. One night, I stood outside in my driveway, staring at their house, debating my next move. That's when I noticed something. The dad? He was home every night. This wasn't just a case of teenagers being teenagers while their parents were gone. He was letting it happen. All right. If being nice wasn't going to work, I had other options. The next night, when my walls started vibrating at 1 a.m., I called the non-emergency police line. The officer showed up about 30 minutes later, knocked on their door, and talked to Rick for maybe 2 minutes before leaving. The music stopped. For one night. The next night? Louder than ever. I called again. Same process. Music stopped that night, but the following night, it was right back. By the 5th time I called, Rick knocked on my door. You think the cops are gonna do anything? He sneered. They just leave after telling us to turn it down. Good luck, nothing will happen. Then he walked away laughing. That was his mistake. I work in city planning. I know exactly how noise ordinances work. I also know about permits, zoning laws, and how to file complaints that actually get results. Rick wanted to play games? Fine. I started collecting evidence. I bought a decibel meter from Amazon and started recording the exact noise levels every night. I wrote down dates, times, and readings. I recorded video of my walls shaking with the bass. I kept a log of every single time I called the police. After 2 weeks, I had enough proof to take it to the city. Austin has a strict noise ordinance that limits residential noise to 85 dB at night, and my recordings were hitting 90 to 100 dB. Not only that, but I found out that anyone playing amplified music at that level after 10 p.m. needs a permit. Guess who didn't have one? I filed an official noise complaint with the city's code compliance department. This isn't like calling the cops. This is a formal process that involves inspections, fines, and legal consequences. A week later, a city inspector came out with his own decibel meter. Rick opened the door, acting smug, probably thinking he could laugh it off again. Until the inspector handed him a $1,500 fine for noise violations. Suddenly, Rick wasn't laughing anymore. The very next night? Same thing. I called again. Another fine, this time $3,000. Rick was livid. He stormed over to my house, yelling about how I was ruining his life. I calmly pointed out that he had been warned. His response? He doubled down. Fine. Time for the next level. The city inspector informed me that because Rick had multiple violations, they could escalate the fines. Even better? If he refused to comply, they could confiscate his sound equipment. I made one final complaint. This time, it wasn't just about the noise. I added documentation about harassment, the laughing, the intentional increases in volume, and Rick showing up at my door. The city scheduled a formal hearing before a judge. Rick still thought it was a joke. Until he walked into that courtroom and saw the evidence I had collected. Audio recordings proving the extreme noise levels, video of my walls shaking from the base decibel meter readings from multiple nights, every police report, and noise complaint logged. When the judge saw everything, his face went pale. Then the judge looked at Rick and said, "This is not a warning. This is a final decision. You are ordered to pay the full fines, and surrender all sound equipment that was used in these violations." Rick's smug look? Gone. The day after the court ruling, something incredible happened. A city truck pulled up in front of Rick's house. 2 inspectors got out, knocked on his door, and handed him a notice. Then, they walked into his house and started removing the massive speakers, the subwoofers, and even the sound system his kids had hooked up in their rooms. Rick stood on his porch, arms crossed, his face red with anger. His kids? They were fuming. One of them actually yelled, "This is so unfair," while another muttered something about me being a snitch. I just stood at my window and watched. I thought this would be the end of it. I was wrong. That night, my house was egged. At first, I thought it was some random kids messing around, but then I found something on my lawn, a smashed Bluetooth speaker, still dripping with raw egg. Oh, I knew exactly who was behind it. The Henderson kids were pissed that their speakers were gone, and now they were trying to get back at me. I wasn't stupid enough to confront them directly, though. I had a security camera pointing at my driveway. Sure enough, when I checked the footage, there they were, 3 teenagers in hoodies, one throwing eggs, another chucking the speaker, and the third flipping off my house before running back inside their own. So I did the logical thing. I filed a police report for vandalism. The next morning, a cop showed up at their door. Rick answered, looking groggy, still in his bathrobe. When the officer told him why he was there, Rick actually laughed. "Eggs? A broken speaker? You serious? That's kid stuff, man. You're wasting your time." The officer nodded. "Right. And if it happens again, it won't just be a warning." Rick scoffed and shut the door. I expected the kids to get the message. They did not. 2 nights later, at exactly 3 a.m., I was woken up by a sound outside. At first, I thought I was dreaming. Then I heard it again. A loud scraping sound. I jumped out of bed, went to my window, and froze. They were keying my car. One of the Henderson kids had a rock in his hand and was scraping it across my driver's side door, while another was trying to break my side mirror. I grabbed my phone and started recording through the window. Then I turned on my floodlights. The moment the yard lit up, the kids bolted. They didn't even make it all the way inside before Rick threw the door open and started screaming at them. I couldn't hear everything he said, but I caught bits and pieces. "Are you stupid? You want to get me arrested? Do you have any idea what you just did?" Rick wasn't mad that they vandalized my car. He was mad that they got caught. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. By sunrise, I was at the police station with my security footage. This time, it wasn't just a warning. This time, charges were pressed. Later that afternoon, 2 officers showed up at Rick's house. They were there to talk about property damage. I didn't hear the full conversation, but I saw Rick go from cocky to panicked real fast. The officers were pointing at my car, at the security camera mounted on my garage, then at his front door. Rick kept shaking his head, throwing his hands in the air. His wife, who I hadn't seen much before, came outside. She looked mortified. At one point, she grabbed one of the teenagers and shoved him toward the cops. A few minutes later, the police left. Rick went inside. And for the first time since they moved in, the Henderson house was completely silent. I figured that would be the final straw. The court had fined them thousands, the cops had been called multiple times, their speakers were gone, and now their kids had criminal charges hanging over them. It had to be over. Then, one evening, I got a notice on my door. A homeowners association complaint. The Hendersons were accusing me of harassment. Apparently, they had filed a complaint claiming I was targeting their family and abusing legal loopholes to force them out. I had to attend an HOA meeting to discuss the issue. Unbelievable. So now, instead of them being in trouble, I had to defend myself against a bunch of angry soccer moms and retirees in khakis. Rick was really trying to flip the script. Too bad for him. I had more than enough evidence to shut it down. But I wasn't going to stop there. I had one last move left to play. A few days after I got the complaint from the Homeowners Association, I found myself sitting in a stuffy community center surrounded by retirees, middle-aged homeowners, and a few younger couples who actually cared about HOA meetings. At the front of the room sat the HOA board, 5 people who had way too much free time and an unhealthy amount of power over things like mailbox colors and fence heights. Rick, of course, was there, sitting with his arms crossed like some kind of victim. His wife, who I later learned was named Diane, was next to him, avoiding eye contact with everyone. The teenagers? They weren't there. The meeting started with some generic HOA business, landscaping updates, complaints about someone's lawn being too long, the usual. Then, the president of the HOA, some guy named Barry, looked at me. All right, next on the agenda, we've received a formal complaint from the Hendersons regarding neighbor harassment. Mister, my last name, we'd like to hear your side. Rick leaned back, looking smug. I pulled out a folder. Sure. I'd love to. I started simple. First, I reminded everyone that Rick's kids had been blasting music at illegal levels for months, disturbing not just me, but multiple neighbors. Second, I showed copies of police reports I had filed, proving that the noise was a documented issue. Third, I presented my decibel meter readings, backed up by the city's own noise inspector. Rick shifted in his chair. Then I went in for the kill. I pulled out still frames from my security camera footage. The kids egging my house. Them keying my car. Rick himself laughing at the police officer when he was told to stop the noise. The HOA members were silent. One of the older women on the board, Mrs. Jensen, squinted at the photos. Wait, your kids did this? She asked Rick. Rick opened his mouth but nothing came out. Then Barry, the HOA president, turned to him. Mr. Henderson, did you forget to mention that your kids were vandalizing property? Rick clenched his jaw. Their kids, he muttered. It was just a prank. A prank? I said, my voice flat. Scratching up my car and throwing eggs is a prank? Tell you what, Rick, why don't we go outside and I'll scratch up your car, and you can tell me if it's just a prank. The room was dead silent. Diane, Rick's wife, suddenly spoke up. Hi, we didn't know about all this. Oh. So she wasn't in on it. Interesting. Rick shot her a look, but she kept staring at the photos in my hand, her face pale. Barry cleared his throat. Well, I think it's clear this isn't harassment. It's just someone trying to live in peace. Mr. Henderson, we're dismissing your complaint. Rick exploded. You're seriously taking his side? He yelled. He's been calling the cops on my kids, getting the city on our backs, and now he's dragging us through the mud at the HOA? What kind of neighborhood is this? Barry didn't even blink. The kind where we follow the law. A few people actually clapped. Rick stormed out. Diane stayed behind. And that's when things got really weird. The next day, around noon, someone knocked on my door. It wasn't Rick. It was Diane. She looked nervous, glancing over her shoulder like she didn't want to be seen. Can I talk to you for a second? She asked. I folded my arms. About what? She sighed. Look, She hesitated. I didn't know about the damage to your car. Or the eggs. I swear. Rick told me the kids were just playing music and you were overreacting. I didn't realize how bad it was. I didn't say anything. Then she took a deep breath. But there's something else you should know. I raised an eyebrow. Okay? She lowered her voice. Rick didn't pay the fines. Wait. What? He told me we had to pay them, but I checked our bank account last night. He never paid a single one. Oh, this was interesting. Diane chewed her lip. The city's gonna come after him. But he's been acting weird. I frowned. Weird how? She hesitated again. He's talking about getting even. A chill ran down my spine. Diane swallowed. Look, I know we don't exactly get along, but I have a bad feeling. Just watch your back. Then she turned and hurried back to her house. I shut the door, my mind racing. Rick hadn't paid the fines. Rick wanted revenge. What the hell was he planning? 2 nights later, at 3 a.m., my power went out. My house was completely dark. At first, I thought it was a blackout. But then I looked out my window. Every other house had lights on. Just mine was out. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. That's when I saw something outside, a dark figure standing in my yard. My stomach dropped. I reached for my phone to call the police. Then, bang. A loud noise came from the side of my house. I sprinted to the other window. Someone had cut my power box open. And that's when I knew this wasn't over. This was just beginning. The power was out. The only light in my house came from my phone's flashlight, casting long, flickering shadows against the walls. Outside, a dark figure stood near my yard, barely visible in the dim glow of the street lamp. My heart was pounding. Then bang. A sharp, metallic clank echoed from the side of my house. I bolted to another window. And that's when I saw it. Rick was standing near my power box, a crowbar in his hand. For a second, my brain refused to process it. Then, reality slammed into me like a freight train. Rick had cut my power. And now he was standing there, gripping a weapon, staring at my house like a predator watching prey. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? I ducked down near the window, keeping my voice low. My neighbor just cut my power. He's standing in my yard with a crowbar. The dispatcher's tone immediately changed. Are you inside the house? Yes. Is he trying to enter? Before I could answer, Rick moved toward my front door. I scrambled back, locking the deadbolt. Then bam bam bam. Rick slammed the crowbar against my door. I know you're in there, he bellowed. Come out and face me, you coward! I backed away, adrenaline surging through my veins. The police are on their way, the dispatcher said. Stay inside. Do not engage with him. Then, something unexpected. A scream. Not from me. From Diane. Rick, stop! A porch light flicked on. Diane was standing on their front steps. What the hell are you doing? She shouted. Rick turned to face her, chest heaving. He ruined us, he roared. You think I'm gonna just sit here and let him destroy our family? Diane stared at him. And then she did something I never expected. She walked into the street, hands shaking, and yelled. You already destroyed it, Rick! You did this! For a second, Rick just stood there, stunned. Then Diane kept going. You didn't pay the fines, you didn't handle anything like a man. You just let your stupid pride turn this into a war. Our kids have a record now because of you. Rick's face twisted. Don't you dare put this on me. Diane laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. On you? Rick, the bank called me this morning. The mortgage is overdue. Where's the money, Rick? Where did it all go? That hit him like a bullet. Rick's grip on the crowbar tightened. But then, red and blue lights flooded the street. The police had arrived. Everything happened fast. 2 officers jumped out of their cruiser, weapons drawn. Drop the crowbar! One of them yelled. For a split second, Rick looked like he was actually considering fighting them. Then, he dropped it. The second it clattered to the pavement, the officers rushed him, pinning him against the hood of the cruiser. Rick started screaming. This is his fault. That man ruined my life. One of the officers looked at me. You the homeowner? I nodded. Yes. I have security footage. And I want to press charges. Rick thrashed against their grip, but it was over. They shoved him into the back of the squad car. Diane didn't move. She just stood there, her arms wrapped around herself, eyes fixed on the ground. By the next morning, the entire neighborhood knew. Rick was charged with vandalism, destruction of property, and attempted assault. And then it got worse. Diane, as it turned out, had no idea their mortgage was overdue. Rick had been secretly gambling away their money. They were going to lose the house. Within a week, a for sale sign popped up in their yard. Diane filed for divorce. The teenagers? Gone. Sent to live with relatives. And Rick? Rick got jail time. I'd love to say I felt victorious. That I stood there watching the moving trucks, sipping my coffee, feeling some grand sense of justice. But honestly, I just felt tired. I never wanted a war. I never wanted this to be personal. I just wanted a peaceful home. But Rick was the kind of man who couldn't take responsibility. He had to make someone the villain. So in the end, he destroyed his own life. And I got my peace back. The neighborhood was quiet again. I sat on my porch that evening, the sun setting, crickets chirping, and for the first time in months, no bass. No shaking walls. Just silence. And it had never sounded so good.